Okay, hey guys, and welcome to this video on amino acids. Right, so in this video, we're going to talk about what an amino acid is and its functional groups. We're going to talk about amino acids being used in polymerization reactions to form polypeptides or proteins. Right, you need to know that that is a condensation reaction, and therefore the polypeptides or proteins that you form are condensation polymers. You also need to be aware that in nature there are 20 amino acids, and our proteins are made by specific orders of these amino acids making up the different proteins. Okay, so let's have a look straight away. Alrighty, so let's take a look at an amino acid. This is the general form of an amino acid. Now, the first thing I would say is that there are two functional groups here, right? An amino acid is a molecule with two functional groups. The first is what we call an amine group, right? Which is your NH2 group, okay? The other you should have already seen, which is this whole thing. Don't be mistaken and say that it's just an alcohol. Notice you've got the COO as well. So this is actually your carboxylic acid group, right? The COOH group. Okay, now having both of those on a molecule, which only has one carbon in between them, like this, right? You see that there's one carbon which is not attached to the double oxygen, right? It's basically attached to each of those groups. This is an amino acid, right? And this R, okay, you might not know what that is. Well, that's because no one does. It basically means anything can go there, right? There must be a hydrogen here, but anything can go in that R group, and they're just the different amino acids, right? So it must have an amine group, and it must have the carboxylic acid group, and there's one carbon in between. That carbon in between has a hydrogen on it, and something else, which could be anything. All right, let's have a look at some examples then, right? So, boom. These are two real-life examples. You find these in your proteins, right? These are real examples. Glycine, okay? Notice that the R group here, which I mentioned before, is actually in glycine. It's just a hydrogen, okay? We still have the amine group. We still have the carboxyl group, and you've still got carbon, hydrogen in the middle. But you've also got another hydrogen added on. That's glycine. Now, you don't need to remember these, by the way. These are just examples. And alanine, everything's the same aside from this, which is something else, right? So the R group is actually, in this case, a methyl group or a CH3 group, right? And there are loads of different amino acids, and all of those groups, so what this carbon is bound to, are different, but the rest of the structure is exactly the same. Okay, so how do amino acids bind together? Well, if you haven't seen my video on condensation polymers, then go and have a look at that right now. Yeah, because you need to know what a condensation polymer is, and this is a specific example of a condensation polymerization reaction, right, which we actually do cover. So, boom. If I were to add those two together, right, glycine and alanine, what I get is the following. Okay, so we get, let me just show in a color, we get the OH, okay, so the OH and one of those hydrogens disappear, right? They bond to form water, and instead, this carbon, I'll do it in a different color, this carbon here now binds to the nitrogen, okay, and that nitrogen still has one hydrogen left on it. Okay, and so you get COO from here bonding to NH from here, and you see that they are now a chain. That is one molecule. And notice on the ends we still have an amine group and we still have a carboxylic acid group, which means on both ends you could attach more amino acids, and that is exactly what happens when we form proteins. Okay, so if you add a load of different amino acids together, they will combine and you get this long chain of all these different amino acids. You could actually take one single amino acid and add a bunch of them together, and you'll get one long chain of itself all joined together in a polymer. And let's show that here, because this looks more like your polymer or your polymerization reaction. Because let's say, for example, you have a general amino acid shown in white. Okay, that's why I've written an R group, right? A general amino acid, and you have it N times. Okay, now what you get is you get N number of waters given off, because every time a carboxyl group and an amine group bind, you get the water released. That's why it's called a condensation. And what you also get is you get the nitrogen and hydrogen bound to the acid group, which would be over this side, and the acid group on this side would be bound to another nitrogen, hydrogen on this side, and it's a long chain, okay, and that chain is N number of repeat units. So this is your repeat unit here, okay? All right. And that is basically that. And if you do that, as we mentioned, you get proteins. Okay, so proteins are made up of one or more polypeptide chains. Now, these all put together are what we call polypeptide chains. If they are the full finished article, we call them proteins. Some proteins are made of more than one polypeptide chain interacting with each other, right? And that's the separation, right? The protein is basically the finished article. The polypeptide chain is one polymer molecule, right? Some proteins are one polypeptide. Some proteins are more than one polypeptide put together. Okay, so proteins are large polymers, right? They have a large range of functions. Yep, you should know that enzymes are proteins. You should know antibodies are proteins. There are loads of different jobs that proteins do. They also provide the structure to your cells, etc., etc. And so proteins have a massive, massive number of different jobs. And there are a crazy high, pretty much infinite number of different proteins that you can actually form. Because proteins can actually have hundreds or even thousands of amino acids in one molecule. And there are 20 amino acids to choose from in each space. And the specific sequence of amino acids dictates your protein. And so there are so many different proteins that could be formed, and in nature we do have a wide variety of different proteins. They all fold into different shapes and they do different things which give them their particular jobs, and that is what happens. Okay, so I'm gonna stop there. That's basically all you need to know. I hope that made sense. If there's anything that still doesn't, please feel free to comment in the box below or send me a direct email. Otherwise, please like and subscribe as per usual, because it does really help me out, and I of course look forward to seeing you in the next video.